Good morning, ladies. I am so humbled to have you here. Man, this is amazing. This is amazing. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking time out of your very busy Davos schedules. I remember walking down the promenade 5 years ago with one of my business partners. We're like, man, we also want to do a house here one day. And now we're here. And I made a point to start this week with a women's breakfast because technology cannot be built without us. So thank you very much for coming. Just a few words on the house. So I'm with Merantix, part of the leadership team there. We run a AI-first venture studio in Berlin and a pre-seed seed fund. So in case you're looking away into a place where to invest in women in tech. We're here for you. We're ecosystem builders in Berlin. So we brought very much this spirit also to Davos. So you'll notice it's not branded. We basically are very aware that we can't build this technology by ourselves. We all have blind spots. We need to cooperate. We need to collaborate. And that's the spirit of the AI house here in Davos. And what better way to start than with you? I am completely flabbergasted at our lovely speakers, and I could not have done this without Vera Futrzański, who is the CEO and founder of Beyond. And thank you so much. Please come here. Mwah. Thank you so much for curating the session as well. And we basically are doing these women's dinners in Berlin, right? Always connecting like women's do, and we're like, let's do something together. So thank you so much for being so giving to us. Exactly. Thank you. I think our guests, one of our guests is not yet here, but I think it's Davos craze. I know it's like logistics is always such a challenge. So what we want to do is we want to have a brief discussion, about half an hour. It's a 1.5 hour breakfast. We're going to have a few questions on stage. We're going to open it up to you, and then you're more than welcome to mingle, have breakfast. We're doing a program all week. Please register. Please come. Please make this a colorful female house. And without further ado, I would love to introduce Deemah Yahya. She's the Secretary General of the Digital Cooperation Organization, DCO, focusing on global digital transformation and economic empowerment, especially for women and youth. She connects leaders and promotes cooperation. She founded Women's Spark for Women in Tech and serves on various boards. You began your career in IT. You became the first Saudi woman in a leadership role at Microsoft. And actually, I started this morning at another women's breakfast. And there was a report from IBM. And dare I say, Saudi was quoted as one of the countries that's really taking it seriously to put more women in tech. And thank you, because I know it's you driving this. So thank you for doing this for all of us. Please. I'm very honored as well to welcome Dr. Nigina Muntean. She is the Chief Innovation Officer of UNFPA, a UN agency focused on sexual and reproductive health. She leads innovation efforts, particularly those aimed at advancing opportunities for women and girls. You co-founded the Equalizer UNFP Accelerator, which invests in women-led organizations to combat inequality. You're also driving force behind the Equity 2030 Alliance, a partnership working to close the gender equity gaps in science, technology, and financing solutions. So thank you also very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And also on this note, I hear you might be joining us in Berlin with a fabulous women health-centered center by the UN. So we're very much looking forward to collaborating on this. So I know it's hard because you're doing so many amazing things. But Deemah, maybe could you put in words what is your main focus for 2024? What are the initiatives around AI and diversity that you're really focusing on this year?
Well, thank you so much first for having us. It's always fulfilling and motivating to be in a room full of amazing women, which gives a breath of fresh air that you're not alone and facing all these challenges on a day-to-day basis, especially in an industry where it is a very male-dominant industry, like our industry. I'm very excited for 2024 specifically. Looking at the technologies that is evolving and rapidly evolving, and we see innovators, women founders increasing. That gives a lot of motivation and positivity that we're moving women from job seekers to job creators. We're very pleased to see the increase of women being our girls being attracted more to science and technology, and looking at it as an enabler for the future. It's exciting to see the opportunities or the efforts that are done to find the right financial resources to work on infrastructure and connectivity, and making sure that the 350 million women that are not connected, they are able to connect and able to afford that connectivity, either from devices or even services. So that is all positive, and the opportunities are massive. But we look at still, there are some challenges that we have to face, and I think 2024 is for us to put hands together and to overcome these challenges, for instance, looking at the biases and discrimination when it comes to how the technologies are being regulated. We look at AI right now and see that there's a lot of talk about, okay, let's regulate AI, but who is regulating the AI? Mm-hmm. And this is where there has to be more contribution of women professionals in AI in that discussion, in these rooms, in public sector specifically. We see the increase in private sector, but still we do not see that in the public sector. So this is where we have to push more this year specifically.
Thank you. And can you maybe give us a few insights? I mean, you just mentioned the number has increased again to 37%, no?
Oh, yes.
Can you give us
talking about
what are you doing? What are we all not doing that you're doing?
If we're talking about specifically yes. Saudi Arabia,
yes.
We're very fortunate that we have an organic growth when it comes to the interest of women and girls in pursuing STEM education. Mm-hmm. So organically, we have 57% of our IT graduates are women. But the challenge that we always faced was how do we retain them? How do we retain the graduates to continue in the sector and not drift from the sector? I was one of them. I graduated with a cohort of 60. Fast forward 10 years, only 3 of us were working in the sector, and the rest all have drifted from the sector. So here is where the focus the past 3 years was in creating the right opportunities for women, creating the right career progression as well. You know, we had before a developer is a developer for 10 years. We never increased. So here is where we changed that. We provided more career progression. Upskilling, we gave equal opportunities for women in terms of training and upskilling opportunities. And what really was important also, which changing the reforms, the policies and regulations when it comes to equality in the sector, in the IT sector for women and men. We gave more opportunities for women in remote areas to work for actually companies and private sector and governments in the vibrant cities, where we had women in rural areas and they had accessibility even before COVID. They were working online and they were working distantly. And that increased positively for the participation of women in the sector in Saudi Arabia. So it grew from 15% to 37%. This year, and we still have a target of more than 50%. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard. I'm vice president of the German Startup Association in Germany, and we bring out this startup monitor, and unfortunately, female-founded tech companies have decreased last year in Germany. So I'm like sometimes because all of us are working on this for so many years, right? And you just want to cry when you read a report like this. So thanks for highlighting some of the policies that seem to be very successful for you. Nigina, can you tell us a little bit about the incredible work you're doing at UNFPA? What are you doing and what are you focusing on 2024 with regards to AI and diversity?
Thank you, and so happy to be here and so many people. It's amazing how you attracted the interest of so many and diverse crowd. So I'm Chief of Innovation at United Nations Population Fund, which is UN Sexual Reproductive Health Agency. So we specifically focus on health and rights of women and girls. We work in 150 countries and territories. And our 3 major goals which we're trying to achieve is to end gender-based violence, to end unmet family planning needs, and to end maternal mortality. And on the way here, someone asked me, are you in AI? And I'm not a developer, but I love the title of the session. It's Women's AI. And I can honestly say this is what we are working as part of our job, is to make sure that the technology, including frontier technology like AI, is women's AI too. It works for women. And to make sure that it is, you have to include women. You have to include women in the data set, in the design, in the algorithms. And at the moment, it is so biased. And we work, of course, mostly, as I said, on gender-based violence and healthcare. And we know that over 80% of AI outcomes gives like errorless outcomes. Because the algorithm, because the data sets are so biased. And I was just recently at DLD in Munich, I was speaking with one of the guru of AI and said, but we have to do something, we have to acknowledge it. And he said, well, if we filter all the solutions only to the data sets where women are equitably represented, it will collapse. It will break the model, the system, because it will shrink so much that it will not be applicable or usable anymore. And honestly, I said, well, maybe that's the way. Let's break it and build it from scratch, but in the right way. Because otherwise, we continue using and amplifying that errors and biased applications. And what we do, I run innovations, and of course, there are many innovative solutions we are implementing. But when AI comes in, it really revolutionary. It can change so much if used in the right way. For example, we use AI in ultrasound and pregnancy. And with a very simple kind of mobile phone-looking device, you can give it to someone who is really not trained in medicine at all. And you follow the AI pattern, what to do, certain moves, and it gives you, okay, there is a gross abnormality, there is a danger. Send that woman to doctor, so she needs to be seen. Or there is a mild risk, see her again in a month, or everything looks okay. And in the countries, like we started in Honduras now, for example, in the countries where you don't have doctors in a rural area or even midwives, that's really life-saving, because that simple device can actually give life-saving referrals in time. So they are going and see the healthcare when you need to. The same comes for education. We use chatbots, smartbots, with AI-powered in India, for example. And of course, this is where you, especially as you're a young woman, young girl, you're afraid to go to a doctor, or you feel you will be judged if you ask about contraception or your sexual activity, or I don't know, boyfriend or potential boyfriend. So a lot of the girls avoiding that because they don't want to be judged in the community. But you can have your kind of trusted AI friend who can tell you everything. Or also training midwives. And we know then through the questions, where are the gaps? So we go to the analytics of it and say, okay, this is the same question coming in this province. So this is where we take it offline and train them better. And of course, talking about inclusion, we train those models with the communities. So it's not like it's developed somewhere in Switzerland or Germany and dumped in India, let's say, or Kenya. It is trained with people there. It is trained with their voices, with their concerns, with their representation. And that's what we're talking about, making it inclusive. And that's why we call it also equity, because Equity 2030 is the alliance which talks about inclusive solutions, being it AI, healthcare, technology, even financial algorithms. I don't know if you heard about the mom's penalty in recruitment algorithms. The AI exclude women who have gaps due to maternity leave. So they are not really considered as a potential good candidate because there is a gap in the employment. Is it their fault that they give kids and look after them? No, but there is a mom's penalty. So it all can be corrected because, as you know, AI is not by itself a creature. It's created by people. it's fed by people. The algorithms, the data set are run by people. So we humans can make sure that it works and becomes women's AI. As when we talk about humans, that the humans are represented by all.
I think a very important point that you're touching on, right? Both on the data side. So I love that we actually have one founder in the venture studio. We have one venture actually focused on breast cancer and bringing this to North Africa, India, and Latin America. And nobody should be dying of breast cancer today. It's very preventable disease. So absolutely second you on that. And we have one recent startup that's focused on fertility. And there's so many misconceptions. I remember when we first had this idea 2 years ago to do it, we were on a call with someone, and we said, yeah, these infertile, it's a small market, it's a niche thing, a few infertile women, right? And I was like, ooh. How to tell you? They're like, first of all, usually 2 people involved, but you don't seem to have experience with that. And also, it's unfortunately a growing market, and not only in the developed world, also in the developing world. So it's not only about addressing, topics that are seemingly women's topics, but they're actually public health topics, right? I think that's what we get wrong. So often I feel we put ourselves in please include women. It's public health data. It's not even just female health data. It's public. Every life starts in a female body. So this concerns 100% of the population. So thank you so much for this. And also bringing up, co-creating technology. I think that's something, right, very much on the mind. We're tech builders, right? I know there are a lot of tech builders here in the room, and I think thinking about ways in which we can be more inclusive. Who are these underrepresented women? How can we really make this actionable for us? I don't know, Deemah, is this something you focus on? Do you have specific initiatives focusing on?
Definitely. It's in the core of what we do in DCO.
Yes.
We're focusing on women and youth specifically. We truly believe they are the future when it comes to economical growth, which is the women and the youth. DCO, as the representation right now, it represents 15 countries from Asia, Europe, and from Africa. 800 million in population now that we look at. We are looking at more than 3,700 startups. Innovators and technology creators all being created in that ecosystem. We want to make sure that not only we're increasing that local content of technology, but also where does the women fall into that algorithm. So we're working in terms of providing the right opportunities for women. So we have an initiative called We Elevate. And this is where we move traditional businesses into online businesses. Just imagine a woman owning a pizzeria who sells 10 pizzas around the neighborhood just by providing an online solution or an e-commerce solution where people can order. She's going to extend the orders by 100, and therefore she is going to recruit more people. So she's contributing directly to GDP and also job creation. So this is what we're doing right now. We're launching this initiative in Rwanda. We're launching it in Bahrain. We're launching it in Saudi Arabia. And we're looking at covering all our member countries. And this is when it comes to providing the right opportunities. Second is we're looking at increasing the professional women in AI specifically. Now, if you look at the numbers, there's 22% of the professionals in AI are women. Now that we have to increase that number, especially when it comes to public sector. So we're working heavily on providing the right executive programs when it comes to AI professionals in our member countries to increase the women professionals in public sector specifically. We're very proud. The countries that we represent, 50% of our countries right now, the ministers of communication and IT or digital economy are women, especially in Africa, which I am very, very proud to see that evolution in Africa. So the efforts with our ministers, women ministers, we're working on that program. Last but not least, we are working on reforms, which is providing the right policies and regulation reforms in our member countries, not only to, we're not looking at only getting women ready, because it's not just providing the seat. We want to make sure that the women are contributing positively in that seat, and therefore not only in making sure they are ready, but also we're working on capacity. Now, we're talking about AI, we're talking about the opportunities that it unveils with AI, but who can contribute in AI? We're looking at the digital divide increasing rapidly, where countries, especially developing countries, high economy countries, are growing more rapidly in terms of innovation in AI, and therefore low-income economies are not having the right opportunities. So here is where, how can we create capacities where we're going to have decentralized capacities of supercomputers, of technology in the member countries that we represent, where women professionals will have opportunity to innovate, have access to technology, and access to also a diverse ecosystem of other women to create innovations in AI.
Yeah, totally. I mean, oh my God! What a great surprise! Hello! Oh, fantastic!
Sorry, I didn't know I was speaking on this panel, so I apologize for being late.
No worries. So let me just properly introduce you. Thank you for making it through the Davos craze, and I know logistics is always very crazy. So Anna Makanju is the VP of Public Policy at OpenAI, an AI research and deployment company. I'm not sure I have to introduce OpenAI here again, but. Previously, she was a special policy advisor for Europe and Eurasia to Vice President Biden. And prior to that, she was a senior policy advisor to the permanent representative of the United States mission to the United Nations. She also was the director for Russia and National Security Council and the chief of staff for European and NATO policy in the office of the Secretary of Defense. I don't know how many titles we can line up in an introduction, but I'm very happy you made it. And I think this is a great way great to have you here, because obviously it's an important discussion to have, and you're on the policy front, right? An important discussion to have between tech builders, policymakers, NGOs, right? Everybody who's using the technology. So I would just be curious, what are some of the topics that you work on at OpenAI maybe that address diversity aspects, and what's your agenda for 2024? What do you want to tell us about in 2025 when you're back?
I mean, so as you guys know, OpenAI is a bit unusual in that we have this mission to make sure that this technology benefits everyone. And so one of the things my team works on is really figuring out what in the world that means. And so, what does it mean to have equitable access to this technology? Because that entails not just these models, but also hardware. Sorry, I just got off a red eye, so.
I'm sorry. Sorry. But you're doing amazing, and you're looking great. So thanks for being here.
But we actually have a number of projects that really are meant to benefit the communities that wouldn't normally actually have access to this technology. So how do we...
Do you have some water? Do you want some coffee or some water?
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just not... I think it's like I got off having some sort of like...
Let me give you some water. Wait. Yeah. We have some water.
Here.
Sorry. Let me get you some... I'm sorry about this. Yeah, you have a very busy schedule, so...
So one example is we're working with agricultural extension services in Kenya and India. So these are folks that go out to individual smallholder farms and work with them to help them identify like crop disease, which fertilizers they need to use. And they were able to use our technology to move from $35 a farmer per year to 35 cents. So you can actually serve 100 times as many people. So these are the things we're looking for. Like, what are the things that can actually be uniquely enabled with this technology? And they may not be commercially viable, but like these are the directions that we want this technology to go in this year, because obviously commercial companies have realized the benefits, but how can we make sure these communities realize the benefits as well?
Oh, that's good news. And I mean, you've been in the field, right, for a long time. You've seen policies evolve. What do you feel are some of the maybe also take-home points for people here in the room, right? There are a lot of tech builders. I know there are people from different work, from established organizations, entrepreneurs, some investors, NGOs, community builders, researchers. what would you say is something that we can take home and basically do where we are, right? Because I think that's a lot of the questions we have. What can we do every day when we go back home? How can we help?
I mean, I think that where we really need everyone is what I'm encountering more and more is that unfortunately still the overwhelming majority of people have not actually interacted with this technology and they've only read about it. And the sort of, I think the predominant emotion about it still tends to be fear, not excitement. And this is completely understandable, and we have a lot of work to do to ensure guardrails, to ensure that it is equitable, unbiased, etc. But still, I think this is in particular a concern for communities that will be most impacted by it because they're not engaging with it and are using it. Because I think that the narrative that people often hear is that this can harm you, that this can be negative. And so they're not realizing the potential and the benefit. And so I think this is a year that we can try to really shift the narrative. Yes, there are absolutely risks, and all of us need to work very hard to address them. But none of us would be building this if we didn't believe in the incredible promise that this has, and particularly in the incredible promise for this to be an equalizer, as it gives people access to medical services, legal services at a cost that previously would have been prohibitive. And so just shifting this narrative is a key, I think, for 2024.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think also this divisive way of communicating about things, right? Fear-mongering versus very optimistic communities. And I have the feeling they're like almost in different bubbles and not really interacting so much. So very, very cool what you're doing there. Can I actually ask you, how do you go about this? I mean, OpenAI is a company that has such global reach, and how many people are you, and like how do you think about diversity in the team? Because I imagine it's like compared to the world population, pretty small group. So
I mean, I think it's still a tiny company. I think many people don't realize how small we still are. It's now 700 people, which for us is actually quite huge because I think it was only about 150 when I started, and we are starting to globalize and hire people all over the world, but it takes time to do that in a thoughtful way. So and I have on my team, we have worked very hard to make sure that that's a really diverse group, especially because we're public facing. So we need to reflect the communities that we work with. But it's, it's a big challenge. We have a couple of programs at OpenAI to bring in underrepresented talent. Our Scholars program is specifically designed for this. And also because there's so many people who can contribute who are not necessarily ML engineers that can contribute to the technical side as well. So we actually take people from all kinds of disciplines and we just help them learn AI. And they've been incredibly successful at OpenAI. So it's another way to get, just because that specific group tends to not be diverse to begin with. So one way to diversify is to get people who are studying different kinds of technology and other disciplines. But this remains a challenge. We just Sam and I went to Howard University on his trip to DC in part to really encourage people to apply. So this is a challenge for the entirety of Silicon Valley, of course, but in AI it seems to be even more acute.
Yeah, and I mean, fair to say, I think everybody in the room has the same challenge in their organization to kind of make that diversity really happen, right? And it's great to see numbers shifting, but I think we all still have a way to go. Maybe one last topic I just want to quickly broach on is maybe you were talking about regulation and who's regulating AI. What are some of the questions that you have in this regard, or some of the concerns, maybe even initiatives around because it's very topical. I know EU. You've maybe heard there's an EU AI Act, so. There is exactly. So this is a very, very topical for us this year.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt that all of us agree that we have to put in the right regulations and policy. And I'll emphasize on the right. That does not limit the innovation, does not limit the possibilities of building and enhancing. The beauty of technology right now is that everyone can add on it and it evolves going forward. So we have to make sure that the regulations and policies are enabling and are empowering. And this is why in DCO, what we try to do is we engage the private sector, the likes of OpenAI and others, to co-create and go-design from the beginning. It's dangerous to have the public sector isolated from the innovators specifically. Public sector gets does not understand the innovation. The innovators do not explain and provide the right awareness for the governments. Therefore, there's miscommunication, and then it results in regulating the innovation, and therefore sometimes these innovations do not last and grow. So that's one, which is becoming that facilitator of bringing in the innovators with the governments, also civil society, NGOs, and financial institutions, and also academia, to help and support in creating these policies and regulations. That's why we launched the digital space accelerators. We're all over the place. Last year we were in 5 continents, from Kigali to Bangkok to New York to Chile, and we had these accelerators looking at 6 topics. One of them was AI, and looking at it from a digital rights and ethics, as well as IP, which is intellectual property. And we got all the outcomes, and then came back with the recommendation for our member countries to adapt in terms of policy and regulation. So that's in one aspect. Another aspect when it comes to policies and regulations is how can we create a new module when it comes to policies? Why aren't we innovating in policies and regulations? How can we create them? How can we make them live documents and they enhance as we go? And this is what we struggle with because of the bureaucracy in the private and the public sector, that it takes a long time to get these regulations in place. So how can we come up with new modules to set regulations and policies?
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, I thought about you a lot when you're talking about, because health, right, is usually right at that public-private intersection, right? And so what are some of the things that you are looking forward to in 2024, or that you can give us as points? How could we help in making this a success?
I think regulation is very important, but it's also enforcement of regulations. As we know, let me give an example. For example, in clinical trials, still only 20% of clinical trials include women. So we receive medicines, treatment which do not work on us. We have 4 times more adverse reactions. We wait 4 more years to be diagnosed with many conditions. At the same time, there are regulations which says the clinical trials, like in EU, there is a regulation, they should be inclusive, but it's not happening still. So it's kind of like nice to have, but not must have. And this is where I think everybody should work together, how to, as you rightly said, shouldn't limit the innovation, but at the same time should be ethical and serving all inclusively. At the same time, I'm really, really hopeful and optimistic because we're talking about it, we recognize it, we recognize there are problems. You spoke about diverse teams, and the World Intellectual Property Organization reports that only 14% of patents are actually submitted by women. 14 to 16, depends on regions. At the same time, there is a proven fact that if it's a all-female team, there are 30% more likely to develop something for women or with women in mind. So it's not just like the teams are performing better when they're diverse, but they're also performing better for everybody, not just for one part of population. And technology is bringing us really a lot of hope in terms of changing some norms and principles to the right direction too. For example, you know, when slavery centuries ago, where across continents, wasn't just US, right? Africa, Asia, it was a norm. It was okay to have slaves, but then technology came and made farming more labor efficient, and then people started to recognize, no, it's not okay to have slaves. So nowadays, we're also seeing that technology can change norms and ethics around a lot of prospects. And from the healthcare perspective, we're concerned that especially like pregnant and lactating women really often excluded from the clinical trials for the reason which was before it wasn't safe. It was toxicity, harm to fetus and newborns. But AI now, in some clinical trials, can mimic and reduce those risks, making it more ethical that you have, in the early stage, you already overcome those risks and start to include the women and pregnant and lactating women specifically into clinical trials. So like vaccines also developed for them. As you know, the COVID vaccine in the first year wasn't available for pregnant and lactating women because it wasn't tested on them. So actually, I'm very hopeful because with all these hurdles and concerns which are happening, and I think normal for any early development, we know what is not there and what is there, and it gives me really good hope that we can also make it in the right way and change it like really soon, not wait for centuries, but make it equitable, make it working for all, and also help us to actually include those who are traditionally marginalized and excluded.
Yeah.
Can I build on that as
Please.
well? When you about cooperation, when you mentioned, we have to have that diversity in teams as well. Let's take it to a multilateral level as well. When it comes to policies and regulation, it's going to be very difficult for us going forward if every country has its own regulations and policies. And we're going to see that innovators are going to struggle and find challenges in expansion. And for them to thrive and to grow and become unicorns and innovators that are going to bring in economical value for the country, it needs to expand. So therefore, if we don't have a mature, a mutual language when it comes to AI, that's going to be very difficult. And this is something actually we're working on in terms of working on the cross-border data flows, policies and regulations. How can we unify them? How can we create capacities? And also an innovation-friendly policy for AI as well that is unified between countries.
I could not agree more with you that the innovation-friendly part of the regulation is, and then we can also enforce it. But I think what better way to throw this to you, right? Because you are building a global technology, and I think this moving regulatory frameworks. And I mean, in the EU as startups, we were kind of looking at this EU Act. I hear the draft is supposed to be finalized this week. Okay. Yes, so we probably get to read it in early February. But yeah, and I mean, we're very concerned about this, right? So we're almost like, okay, better have an EU regulation, even if it's not perfect, than have national countries start regulating, right? So how is this for you as a tech builder from a global perspective, right, with this policy? It must be interesting.
Yeah, I really liked your point earlier about innovating in the regulatory space, because this is, I get asked every day, like, well, what regulations do you want to see? And this is a very difficult question for me to answer because I see this technology evolving so incredibly fast. For example, GPT-4, we were able to do something called refusals, which means the models can now just refuse to engage in certain behaviors. That did not actually exist in GPT-3. It's a completely new thing, just as of, a year and a half ago when we built this new model. And undoubtedly, we will see things like that emerge where, previously I would have said, certain types of restrictions make sense in regulation, now may not make sense because we have a new way of deploying this technology. And so I think that doesn't mean that we can't regulate. There are plenty of things that I think make sense to do now, but how do you have a world in which there is this, flexibility that we're not committing to something that's going to be completely outdated in a year? And I know that the EU legislators struggled with this quite a bit, but we even have this in the US where at a federal level, we're not necessarily going to move very quickly because of agreement between the two parties, but that means states are now starting to do their own things. So we might have a world in which we have like multiple states with different regimes. So it's not, obviously this is a problem is multiplied at the global level. So really thinking about, the G7 obviously has efforts around this, and the G20 is going to take a more serious look at it this year. But definitely thinking about what are some things that we can agree globally is absolutely critical.
It's a really difficult balance to strike, right? Because a lot of the discussion we're having is about including decentralized communities, right? Like different communities all around the globe, and then finding and getting regulation that unifies all of us, and having discussions about values and actual rules and who's enforcing them. And it's just challenging. It's difficult. I think it all boils down to trust in the end, because we want to build technology we can trust. We want to trust each other, and really, really interesting discussion. So 2 questions from the audience. What do you say? What do you say? Dalit.
Like, just to go on what you just mentioned, that ChatGPT now kind of is not engaging if something is not appropriate. So my question would be, okay, who is defining what is appropriate or not?
Okay, this is the other completely impossible question, but I mean, I think there are certain guardrails which I think we can all agree, like don't counsel people how to commit suicide, don't counsel people how to harm others, etc. But like within this, there's a huge gray area. One of the things that we've been working on is called democratic inputs. So basically, we've given a bunch of grants to organizations to think about like what does it truly mean to have representative values that the model can then embrace. And because I think we are like keenly aware that as 700 people in Silicon Valley, we cannot be making these decisions. But at the same time, there are many communities that want to be represented a certain way, so they may not actually want sort of like the plurality of views. They have a very specific way they want to be represented. But in any event, I think we have some really promising feedback on what it means to have broad-based input, and this is something we're actually going to be really doubling down on in the first half of this year. So I'm pretty sure there's like a blog post coming out pretty shortly. So
Fantastic. Maybe 3 questions. Marissa. And then you.
So I'm curious about, it goes along with that question in some ways, about what it will take to start getting social scientists and culturally responsive social scientists engaged in the design development. I mean, I'm very engaged in design and development. I have been fighting for this. I don't see it. So what will it take from all of you? What would it take for us to get more people? We're talking about machines with humans, but there are very few specialists on humans in the mix. So I'm just curious, what do you think it would take for that to happen?
So we actually have a team called the Human Data Team, because the way these technologies currently work is, we have like the stage where we train the model, and the model starts to understand how to, do certain things like write code or answer questions, etc. And then there's another phase, which is actually much longer and more complicated, called reinforcement learning from human feedback, and that's where the model learns values and how to behave. And steering this is a group of experts called that work for the Human Data Team. So we would actually welcome you to join, this group of experts.
Very good. Collaboration is already starting.
Maybe I also can add, we need to look into the curriculums of training. We're speaking about with students, for example, of like programmers, coders, developers, engineers, scientists. They are trained to be socially agnostic because they want to be innovative. And to be rapidly, like lightning speed innovative, they should be social agnostic and don't think about the social impact and think about it afterwards. And when it's also already a damage control rather than designing it right way in the beginning. So we need to also speak with those who produce those future engineers, coders, programmers, researchers, to have those gender lenses and gender optics. So when they create something, they think about it from the very beginning and not when it's already a consequences of that and they have to fix it. So this is another aspect where what you say, yes, there should be human scientists should be also part of the teams now, but we also need to train them from the very beginning and not to fix it afterwards.
I feel this also a point, like we, for example, we run a professional service company and help a lot of established organizations, and a lot of this transformation is also happening in organizations that are already there, which is basically a lot of humans trying to run a company, right, and trying to complete the company's mission. And I feel like human in the loop systems, right, and kind of engaging in early on feedback is so critical, because you can build the most amazing tech if people don't want to use it. They're not going to use it and gonna find ways around using it. So for us, this is also not only a question of like doing it. It's also in business interest to get this right. Like you don't have to feel just like you're doing the right thing, but it's also it's for a business purpose. So I would completely second that. I think you also had a question, and then yes, and then we're going to cut it off. I'm sorry, but yes, please.
Question for you. So just a follow-up to the first question also. I hosted a podcast recently where the question was, what happens when you teach AI Indigenous Wisdom? And I'm curious, as you're training these models, as you're giving these grants, are you including the voice of Indigenous Wisdom keepers? Because it's also, in a way, the representation of the feminine voice, because one of the things that indigenous cultures have been able to do is really keep that relationship to the planet intact, which is also a feminine seems to not be translating into the technology at least overtly. So is that something that is part of the values set at OpenAI?
Yes, and actually in a particular passion project for me, because I'm a former linguist, and one thing that happens is that this technology becomes quite good at any language with, let's say a couple million speakers that is written. And so one of the things that I've really been working on is thinking about, well, what happens to languages with smaller numbers of speakers, of which, of course, there are many indigenous languages. And, in Nigeria, where I grew up when I was young, there are hundreds of languages. Not all of them are written, and we've worked with like a range of communities to understand what does it take to, because these models essentially compress all of human languages, but to make sure those languages are represented and not lost, in the comparative balance of larger languages. It's actually a really big research challenge and question, but it's something that we're absolutely thinking about and working on.
Well, such an interesting discussion. I know we could continue for hours, but we want to build on this sisterhood here that we're starting here. This is also a room you now know each other. You will see each other in the rows of Davos. Please, let's make this not only about friendship and the human and a connection, but also about business. I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs here, so we will be a louder and louder voice here when we also create these business opportunities and become job creators and all those things. Thank you so much. Again, I want to thank Vera again one more time. Thank you so much. And yes, we'll take and please, there is more. We're running the Air House all week. There are more sessions. Please register. Come back. We're running the women's breakfast actually also in London next month. We're doing it in Berlin. It's already a regular thing. So if you're in Berlin, come visit us and enjoy your Davos week. Thank you. Thank you.